Creation and destruction are the two ends of the same moment, and everything between the creation and the next destruction is the journey of life. Amish Tripathi. To give up yourself to save others, or to give up others to satisfy yourself. The distinction between these two ideas is a deciding factor within what we dub society. But to some, the distinction between these two concepts is not so clear. Underneath our own noses, in the settings we call home, ones who embody both of these concepts live a life every single day. Whether their impact benefits the world that surrounds them, though, is another debate altogether. Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, created by Hirohiko Araki, is a highly acclaimed Japanese franchise spanning 8 manga series and currently 6 anime series. Within both of its primary mediums, it is considered by many in the world to be one of the greatest stories within its genre. Although I am currently still an anime-only fan, by a considerable margin my favorite entry in this bizarre brand is its 4th entry, Diamond is Unbreakable. Set in the town of Morioh in the summer of 1999, in this tale we follow Japanese high school student Josuke Higashikata through his encounters with Morioh's expansive and downright bizarre cast of characters. Although many of these people eventually come to stand as extraordinarily righteous and just, bearing hearts plated with solid gold, a man who stands as the complete antithesis to every golden ideal this setting possesses is the main antagonist of the story, Yoshikage Kira, a serial killer driven by sickening destructive principles, whose twisted and extensive psychology serves as one of the most compelling factors of this narrative.
Good morning, rise and shine, everyone! You're listening to Morioh Radio. Kai Harada here, keeping you company on this beautiful morning. The day is shaping up to be a great one, and I have just what the doctor ordered, so sit back, relax, and enjoy.
To understand any facet of this story, one must understand its setting, Morioh. Based on Araki's hometown of Sendai, Morioh was a town brimming with life and personality. Down every road, through every alley, life breathes all across Morioh, to the point where one could even consider Morioh the most important character within its own narrative. When we are introduced to this town, we follow through the perspective of longtime favorite Jotaro Kujo, seeing what will serve as the setting of such a tale, to the eyes of one we as viewers are already acquainted with so intimately, perfectly eases many into this bizarre abode with a sense of familiarity staying strong as our guide. When Jotaro enters Morioh, very quickly we meet some of its residents that we will soon witness throughout the entirety of this narrative. Koichi Hirose, a relatively normal boy that clearly has more waiting to happen to him, considering he serves as our primary narrator on our first entrance to this town, and will continue to serve as the narrator throughout the entirety of the story. And Josuke Higashikata, the protagonist of this story, and the love child of Jotaro's grandfather, Joseph Joestar, a kind-hearted boy, who, although he can definitely have a temperament in regards to some obvious sensitive points, remains true as one of Morioh's most selfless citizens. All over, people from all types of backgrounds and all walks of life call Morioh home. From city dwellers like Rohan Kishibe to foreigners like Tonio Trendy, Morioh constantly succeeds in convincing you that it is a living, breathing location that is inhabited by living, breathing people. One of the most fundamental factors in that success is the iconic Morioh Town radio show. The first thing we hear once we enter the settlement, Morioh Town Radio, similar to Big Shot from Cowboy Bebop, frequently serves as the primary in-universe way to inform both its residents and viewers of the events that occur within this world. Having something like this be what provides us with details that humanize this setting, along with expressing to us the events that occur within this town, allows us as viewers to experience this information as if we were one of the town's citizens, helping sell this town as one that is genuinely alive to an extraordinarily high degree. From joyful moments like Josuke and Okuyasu winning the lottery, to moments of pure terror like the sadistic murder of Shigechi, minute details like this, paired alongside the show's other carefully placed attributes, such as minor changes in visual foreshadowings to important locations along the way, go a long mile in uniting us as viewers with the events that occur within this tight-knit community. These uniting factors are what makes the sense of loyalty and utter care its citizens have towards this town feel completely believable and sympathetic. People like Ryohei Higashikata, Reimi Sugimoto, and Shigekio Yangu are just some of the people that, even when facing disgusting circumstances that end in their heartbreaking deaths, consistently prioritize the protection of the town they call home. One of Morioh's other striking qualities is the sheer contrast between the citizens who find common connection within it. Within this town of inviting warm yellow skies and serene blue waters, the majority of those who call it home possess shining hearts spurred forward by justice. Though opposed to these people who bear hearts plated in solid gold, people such as Angelo Katagiri and Yoshikage Kira bear hearts fueled by sickening and hateful desires, acting upon those desires in terrible and destructive ways, with effects that can be persistently felt by all who align the streets of this abode and all who witness them as viewers. Morioh's heartfelt core, and its regular effort to try and transform its viewer into feeling as if they were one of its citizens, is one of the most important elements in making Diamond is Unbreakable such a resonant story, allowing us to understand and unite with both its emotional events and individual characters on a far more intimate level, serving as one of its most important layers of groundwork, completely recontextualizing almost all of its major characters, factors, and events. As are many things in Morioh, Josuke Higashikata is a prime example of something that should not be taken at face value. Josuke is a boy with an exterior resembling a delinquent, bearing physical traits that are often associated with bad and looked down upon behavior, though he stands as a complete antithesis to these notions, being almost the textbook definition of what one would consider a good man. Higashikata Josuke, written in Japanese as this, is a combination of the kanji for Higashikata, which means essentially person of the east, and Josuke, which can also be read as Jojo, translating to roughly cane helper, a perfect reflection of who he is at his fundamentals, a boy with a willingness to help all in the town he calls home, and even more literally, represents the scene when he helps old Joseph after his cane breaks. As an extension of his willingness to protect, Josuke possesses the stand Crazy Diamond, a majorly pink-colored stand, with hearts, kind shapes, and other soft elements being apparent and defining focal points to its overall motif, further accentuating the theming of hearts that are consistent with Part 4's soul. The name Crazy Diamond is derived from the 9-part Pink Floyd composition aptly named Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and this basis is reflected in more than simply its name. Crazy Diamond is a power determined by its ability to protect and restore, but two of its greatest hindrances are the fact that it cannot be used to heal its user, and even more interestingly, the extent of how far gone its target can be to have any form of effect. These parameters of effect serve as a very possible reference to the co-founder of Pink Floyd, and one whose Shine On You Crazy Diamond was made in tribute to, Syd Barrett. Syd, during his run with Pink Floyd, at a certain point fell into a deep sense of troubled mental health and drug use, which affected his ability to create music alongside his fellow musicians. As a result of this, the other members of the band found it necessary to oust him from their group, replacing him with industry legend David Gilmour. This aspect of Syd and Pink Floyd's history undeniably shares some similarities with the powers of Crazy Diamond. Crazy Diamond, a power brought by pure and kind intentions, which delivers prosperity and restoration to others but lacks any ability to affect itself, reflects Syd almost perfectly, a man who walked down a path of tragic circumstance, who influenced and brought happiness to millions with his creations, but was in the end unable to make any action that saved himself, being unable to salvage his relationships with his group of once great friends, his physical health that now left him unrecognizable to said friends, or his own mental state. And although Josuke never experiences such darkened events, the similarities between the scope of their impact and who they were unable to leave impact on is a definite commonality between these two men. In Josuke's world, the most important thing to him, and the thing he takes most pride in, is his hair. His hairstyle is one which he adorns in honor of the man who selflessly put his life at risk when he was a child on the verge of death, to give him and his desperate mother a fighting chance to prevent what they believed to be his assured fate. Ever since that day, Josuke's definitions of what it means to be a good person and what it means to be a citizen of Morioh completely follow on that example. Just like his stand takes reference from the band Pink Floyd, Josuke himself takes further reference from another musical legend. Prince is one who Josuke shares a multitude of physical similarities with, both having outfits covered in anchor designs, both wearing signature purple outfits, and both having striking and memorable large hairstyles, with Josuke's being extraordinarily well kept, and Prince's standing as the opposite to that. Another interesting similarity, though, comes from a much more nuanced aspect of both of their beings. Like Josuke, Prince also lived in the example of one he dubbed his hero, the King of Rock, Elvis Presley. Elvis, ironically bearing a hairstyle more similar to Josuke's than Prince's, was a huge inspiration for the Yankee subculture that Josuke's entire character took consistent influence from, and was also a leading example in Prince's life, being what Prince aimed to live like ever since an extraordinarily young age, similar to Josuke and his admiration from the pompadour-bearing man who saved his life at a young age. This initial action, taken by a complete stranger, is the first showcase in the timeline of Diamond is Unbreakable's narrative, of the power that Morioh commands, being what illustrates to us as viewers the fact that the smallest action taken in a town driven by such golden gospels can and will have a powerful chain reaction spreading far beyond what was ever initially intended, becoming the formation of what will positively change this world. This chain of positivity stays true with Josuke through all of his days, becoming the foundation of his most guiding principle and defining characteristic, his selfless creation.
Josuke.
He's healed, right?
Listen, Josuke. It's said the human organism must destroy in order to survive. But your power is an unparalleled act of compassion in a brutal world. The problem is, no amount of compassion or love can bring back the dead. Not even stands have that power. I'm sorry.
In a world led by often needless destruction and violence, Josuke Higashikata stands as a pillar of constant kindness, a pillar of selfless creation. The power of Crazy Diamond is an unprecedented and unspeakably pure one. The power to bring health and prosperity to all who surround it other than itself is one that brings along with it a fate that requires unspeakable conviction and purity to withstand. A boy who grew up without a father. A boy who almost lost his life as a child in a blizzard. A boy who grew up with almost no friends. A boy that when met with the information about the one he called Dad, instead of reacting with anger and disgust, simply bowed his head to profusely apologize for any inconvenience he may have caused. A boy who had his grandfather ripped from him. A boy tasked with the duty of defeating countless opposing deadly murderers. This is Josuke Higashikata. This is the purity of Crazy Diamond. And this purity is what he completely embodies continuously. This purity is what Josuke refuses to sacrifice at any point. Even when he starts as the clearly most inexperienced Jojo compared to his contemporaries, having nowhere near the initial talent and capability they all had right out of the gate, Josuke does not make selfish decisions to assure victory, and most certainly does not allow his golden guiding morals to be tarnished under any circumstance. Araki's ideal when creating Josuke was for him to feel like a friend. As opposed to Jojo, who was designed to feel like a hero from a comic book, with strong line work and coloring, a larger-than-life build, and an aggressive personality, Josuke possesses traits almost completely opposite to this, having soft lines be consistent with his motif, with light colors like pinks being extraordinarily detrimental to what he represents, having a much slimmer and softer body build, and having an extraordinarily pure, kind, and easygoing personality. These aspects of his are what help him meld together beautifully with the consistent strengths of Morioh, becoming the manifestation of every core ideal that Araki intended him and Morioh to embody.
You can call me Yoshikage Kira. I'm currently 33 years old. Not that you'd care, but I reside in Northeast Morioh's Villa District. Also, I've yet to marry. In order to make a living, I work for Kameu department stores. After a long day's work, I return home no later than 8 p.m. I don't like smoking, but do enjoy the occasional drink. I'm always in bed by 11 p.m., and I make it a point to get no less than 8 hours of sleep each night. Before bed, I drink a warm glass of milk. It's always coupled with 20 minutes of stretching to decompress from the long workday. Sweet dreams are the usual result of this. I then awake as refreshed and recharged as a newborn child, ready to take on the day's challenges. And after my last checkup, I was given a clean bill of health.
Hey, what's the big idea, Creeper? Why are you telling me this crap?
For as long as I can remember, I've done everything in my power to live a productive life that allows me to pursue a lasting inner peace. This may be a foreign concept, but I choose not to concern myself with winning or losing, life's troubles, or enemies who bring sleepless nights. That is how I cope with this backwards life we find ourselves living. It's what brings me happiness in a world fraught with hardship and misery. Of course, if I were ever to engage in combat, I would win the battle without question. In other words, Shigechi, you are an irksome troublemaker who stands to hinder my sleep. You, boy, are the enemy.
That!
Deadly Queen. I named it myself, and truth be told, I'm quite proud of the moniker. But before you have the chance to utter a word of this to another soul, I shall eradicate you. I'll sleep soundly tonight. I can already feel it.
Yoshikage Kira, just like Josuke, is a man who should not be taken at face value, though for the completely opposite reasons to Josuke. On the surface, Yoshikage is a perfect man, a man with a strong, robust body build, well-groomed hair, and suave designer clothes. But just like Josuke's appearance does not align itself with many of the traits associated with it, the same can be said true for Kira. Kira's name, like Josuke's, reflects an insanely large amount of his being. Kira Yoshikage, written in Japanese like this, is composed by the kanji for his surname, Kira, obviously sharing an extremely similar pronunciation of the word killer, but it can also roughly translate to good fortune or luck, an aspect of his that serves as an extraordinarily defining factor of his being and one of his most proud traits, and also is made up by the kanji for his given name, Yoshikage, which can be also translated to roughly words equaling good luck and fortune, translating roughly to lucky man in the shadows when combined, but also serves as simply an extremely uncommon given name that is shared with some notable people in Japanese history who lived lives of forced secrecy similar to Kira. The extent of similarities and key dualities that these two men share don't stop there though. Just like Josuke, Kira also possesses a primarily pink-colored stand. As opposed to Josuke's Crazy Diamond though, Killer Queen is defined by far more sharper lines and shapes, bearing a pair of pointed cat ears that in a way reflect Kira's likeness to such felines. Kira, just like most house cats, is a creature that defines himself by his ability to blend into everyday life, sinking into the background and rarely bringing attention to himself, staying calm, cool, and composed, acting mostly alone, and almost never relying on the assistance of passerby. This connection and likeness to cats is treated even more on the nose as the story extends, as Kira finds literal camaraderie in a deceased cat-turned-stand user named Stray Cat, proceeding to rely on its abilities and similarities to himself to succeed in climactic stand battles for the rest of the narrative. Also like Josuke, whose stand is named after an extraordinarily famous piece of music, Kira takes his stand name from the extraordinarily successful Queen hit Killer Queen. Where Crazy Diamond's parallels with the composition it is based on lay mostly in the history behind it, Killer Queen finds the majority of its similarities through titles and lyrics spanning a large amount of Queen's collection of music. She's a killer queen, gunpowder, gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind anytime. This set of iconic lyrics are just some of the ones that describe both Kira and his stand completely, describing his face value powers and their general capabilities, and talking in detail about explosions. But in addition, the story told through Killer Queen's lyrics is one about going after high-class prostitutes, a group of people Kira finds obvious interest in and shows a painful desire to kill those sharing similar traits to. His second level bomb, Sheer Heart Attack, is at its core an extremely chaotic power, being very different in level of caution to his other abilities. This element of chaos that it is led by is perfectly exemplified by the song it takes naming basis from. Sheer Heart Attack, a song about a girl who is so attractive that you'd explode on sight, is a song far more chaotic at its core than many of Queen's other songs, serving as yet another similarity to Kira and what brings him purpose in his existence. And lastly and most importantly, his third level bomb, Bites the Dust. Bites the Dust serves as debatably the most interesting of his powers, having its name be based on elements completely opposed to what he normally finds his basis from. Just as Kira at this point in the story had mostly abandoned his total fixation on his desire to kill and overtake women, focusing far more on protecting his identity at any cost, another one, Bites the Dust, the song this power takes its identity from, is the only one of the three songs Kira names his powers after to not involve any focus or fixation on women, being instead a song originally about simple cowboy fights, that within its production, evolved to also cover the famous St. Valentine's Day shootout. Throughout Another One Bites the Dust, a theme of looping was ever present in every inch of its creation. This theme of looping more than any other is the most defining factor of Kira's ultimate power. As anyone who has seen the story should know, Kira's power of Bites the Dust is one that through a series of explosions constantly sends its target in an almost inescapable loop through time in order to protect the threatening secret of his identity, having this cycle of death and secrecy occur 6 times in the narrative, with 5 individual casualties between those occurrences. The same number of times the words "Another One Bites the Dust" are repeated in the song, and the same number of deaths that are mentioned throughout, fusing both the song's original themes of violence and looping together as one. Queen is not the only famous musician Kira finds influence from, though. In terms of his design, he bears an extremely oftenly pointed out similarity to the legend David Bowie. Though funnily enough, that too serves as another connection to Queen. As many know, David Bowie collaborated with Queen on the song Under Pressure, a track chronicling the pressure that pushes us to act in the ways we do during our existences, obviously serving as yet another perfect nod and descriptor for the entirety of Kira's character. Where Josuke is led by an obsession to protect that which he finds respect in, Kira is driven by an obsession to destroy all that possibly stands as a threat to the respect he feels for himself. Kira at his core is hopelessly simple, not having any grandiose motivations of conquest like other Jojo villains, but is driven by a simple psychotic urge to act upon his own principles without receiving judgment from those he believes don't deserve to act against his peace. This simplicity, though, is where he finds his complexity. Despite being driven by such simple principles, the acts he takes to assure his constant simplicity are anything but simple. Methodical, careful, and utterly destructive. These are the types of moves Kira makes on a consistent basis to protect his lowly simplicity. From the deaths of Reimi and Shigechi to the incarnation of his power Bites the Dust, Kira consistently acts on these desperate urges, which in a cruelly ironic way makes him one of the most desperately human characters spanning all of Jojo's narratives. When viewing specimens like Kira, it can be very easy to blanket them as simply inhuman. After all, they perform utterly disagreeable and abhorrent actions and take disgusting steps in general life, things we often relate and equate to creatures below humanity. Despite the fact, though, it cannot be said for every person in a similar situation to Kira, Kira's humanity is his most true factor. Kira, like any human, has a career. He has routines. He has aspirations. He has family. He has moments driven by luck. He has decisions on whether or not to marry. He has sexual desires. And these general factors of everyday existence mean just as much to him, if not more, than they do to any regular human. In the case of Kira, though, what separates him from many isn't what he is driven by, but the simple extent of how much he is driven by what drives him. While many have routines they use to map out their days, Kira lives according to his routines almost as if they were a gospel ripped straight from a Bible. While many have minor inconveniences involving apparel, Kira, when seeing another person's sock inside out, spends valuable time to correct the issue, which in the end forces him to stay in the same location too long, being what ultimately pushes him to make otherwise unnecessary decisions that end in his defeat. While all of us have days and moments decided by luck, Kira lives completely revolving around his own sense of luck, believing in its power almost as if it were a faith to him, being left completely distraught the moment it fails him. While we all bear sexual desires and urges in our lives, Kira utterly obsesses over how they can express him in his truest form, painfully equating sexual urges to the compulsion to physically injure others to truly act upon what he deems to be his truest self. Where Josuke feels firmly like a friend, Kira is the personification of what it means to be an enemy. Humanity is a running trait in Jojo. From its beginning to its current point, Jojo is a story that has always embodied what it truly means to be human, in the most exaggerated of ways. Diamond is Unbreakable is no different. From every corner of Morioh, humanity can be felt living and breathing. And while that can definitely be said true for Kira, what truly defines him, and what makes him stand out as such a blood-curdling and terrifying villain, is how he calmly represents the possibility that a force in plain sight can stand as the truest and most pure definition of what it means to prey on others, to hunt down and take advantage of others' precious humanity. This is Yoshikage Kira. This is his selfish destruction. Selfless creation and selfish destruction. This is what leads these two men, and what their character dynamic exemplifies. Josuke Higashikata and Yoshikage Kira. Both men of Eastern descent, who embody the values of their homeland perfectly, despite standing as complete opposites. Crazy Diamond and Killer Queen. Stands that represent completely different ends of an extreme spectrum. Both colored pink, one soft and one sharp. One who brings life to others, and one who robs life from others.
Before you dullards get all high and mighty, I should tell you I wasn't running away despite appearances. I can obliterate any one of you the instant the thought occurs to me. I detest conflict. I hate the very idea of it with the white-hot intensity of 1,000 suns. Conflict runs completely counter to the peace and tranquility I strive for every day of my life. It's really quite simple to rise victorious in a single battle. But of course, the stress begins to pile up before the next one. It's a foolish endeavor. To engage in conflict is to engage in futility.
You brought this shit on yourself when you murdered Shigetsu, you freaking idiot!
You're a sick son of a bitch who kills for fun! You shouldn't get the privilege of flapping those stolen gums! You cat-eyed freak!
Josuke and Kira are both men ushered forward by these constantly opposing mindsets and circumstances. In terms of their families, Josuke, a boy who grew up with no father, and Kira, a man who grew up with a doting father that attempted to give him everything, consistently staying in his life, assisting his sickening sexual desires and murderous actions. In regards to their desires, Kira, a man who always yearned for a quiet life to act based on his purest desires, conformed to the correct standards of society in terms of both physical and emotional appearance, but was still unable to assure his peace. And Josuke, a boy who, despite taking many actions to fight against the status quo, having both an appearance and personality traits going against anything one would consider the norm, had the constant quiet life that Kira always desired essentially handed to him on a silver platter, despite some occasional hardships. In response to the harm of others, when Josuke is at his last leg in his fight with Kira, he chooses to drag another person, Okuyasu, all the way to a safe house, putting his own life at risk to simply protect his friend, versus Kira, who when he confronts almost anyone, prioritizes only his own safety, killing anyone in sight who can be a detriment to him. The existence of the dualities between these two men are what help illustrate Morioh in its truest colors, and what propelled Diamond as Unbreakable's narrative from beginning to end. The best showcase of this is obviously their climactic showdown towards the end of the story. After every step they had both taken, they both came face to face in an explosive match that totally displays them in their truest forms. Although to begin with, Kira only bade worry at the potential and power of Jotaro Kujo and his stand Star Platinum the world, he quickly learns and realizes that his truest and most opposing foe would always be the boy that embodied the element most against the one he lived in the example of, the boy led by creation, Josuke Higashikata.
How irksome. That blasted ability to correct. Without it, my bomb would be unstoppable. I see now that the greatest obstacle standing in the way of my attaining peace and tranquility isn't Jotaro. It's him. Josuke Higashikata.
And Josuke, a boy who had always lived with a smile on his face. A boy who, during Kira's first reveal, was unable to come in time to deal any form of true damage to this destructive man, is forced to fight against this embodiment of destruction, almost alone after the point where he loses Okuyasu in the fight, only having assistance from a random non-stand wielding boy, who represented Morioh's shining heart of justice more than most, Hayato Kawajiri, a boy who Kira now called son due to him taking on the identity of the man he once called a father, who over the course of the fight, like many, comes to realize and rely on the justice that drives Josuke, in a last-ditch effort to thwart Kira's plans and put an end to the destructive streak of his newfound power, bites the dust. Throughout the fight, the dualities that were once small parts of the greater pictures known as Josuke and Kira become important and changing elements of their combat. Their human priorities, their familial relationships, and their true identities all clash against one another. Kira relies on his father he mostly discarded. Josuke relies on Hayato's attempt at self-destruction, and both of them rely on their assurance that the concepts they live by will guide them down the correct avenue in this conflict. Although they don't convene on many occasions across the narrative, Kira and Josuke's dynamic is evident, with a menagerie of carefully and purposely placed small pieces of information, minor physical and emotional details, and larger pieces of reference being consistently opposing and dualizing between them, painting the picture of one of the most interesting hero and villain dynamics in the medium. This intricately designed relationship stands as one of the primary reasons that to this day Diamond is Unbreakable is still considered such a strongly constructed and resonant narrative.
How about it, Jotaro? You worried about what might happen when we leave this place?
I am, just a bit.
Because of all of this, we've had the chance to see how capable Josuke and his friends are. And there's one thing I can say with absolute certainty. The young people living in this town are heroes one and all, and each one of them possesses a heart of gold. They've the same righteous hearts we witnessed on our journey to Egypt. They carry a spirit of radiance that will fight for true justice above all else. I see it in Josuke, as well as the others. Morioh's in good hands with them. As long as they're here, we have nothing to worry about.
The passion and respect Hirohiko Araki clearly bore for this setting, the characters within its narrative, and the aspects of life they found their real-world basis from, oozes from every facet of this story. From start till finish, Diamond is Unbreakable remains one of Araki's most purposeful, passionate, and carefully put together pieces of his work, and stays true as both mine and many others' favorite walk down the library that is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The hearts people bear in life can always be categorized differently depending on their color. Some hearts are pitch black, some are blood red, some are gray, but some are shining gold. These golden hearts, championed by the righteous and just, are the ones that pave the path to a true future, the path of prosperity and close relationships, the path to truly great days.
Dumbass. Well, come on, let's bounce.